we are back here with Follow Up Boss, Bosses in Action, and we have Elena Key here today, and she's going to be walking us through the top seven pawns that you should be using for effective lead management. And this is going to be a good one here today because it's going to help you, optimize your lead organization, improve your follow-up processes, and then ultimately boost your success in real estate. So, Elena, I'm excited to have you here today. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Let us know who you are, and we can get started.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Trenton. So a little bit about myself. I've been using Follow Boss since 2016, and I help real estate agents set up Follow Boss with action plans, automations, lists, and best practices, essentially. So I'm really excited to dive into pawns today. That's a common question I get asked often, and decided to finally go full into the pawns and figure out what's best practice. So I'll just go ahead and dive into the seven and share my screen just so we're not losing any time to make sure we have enough time to get through all of them. Let me go. Can you see my screen share, by the way, before I continue?
We can, yes.
Okay.
So jump right in here. Everybody, if you are in attendance here, let us know if you have any questions. Drop them in the chat and we'll get them answered. In the meantime, Elena's going to show us some great stuff here. And so let me hand it over back to you.
Awesome. Yeah, and hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A if people have questions at the end. Before I dive in, I will be moving kind of quickly, which is just something I commonly do to make sure I get through everything, but it is recorded, as well as I have a guide to give you for these seven pawns at the end, and I'll get you access to that. Before I dive in, there can be some confusion of what a pond is and the purpose behind it. So I wanted to clarify that first. So a pond, when I'm talking about ponds, I'm specifically talking about ponds in the CRM Follow Boss. Ponds is a feature available for teams of two or more, or if you have two or more users essentially in Follow Boss, you have access to ponds. If you don't have access to pawns because you're a solo agent, a solo user in Follow Boss, you can still have takeaways from today of different ways to use a number of these pawns, just without the pond part. And I'll show you what I mean in a little bit. The purpose of a pond is to allow multiple users to have access to leads. So as a result, it allows them most often the ability to all attempt to reach leads or all collectively nurture leads so that your company has a higher likelihood of not only making an initial connection with the lead, but also converting the lead. Because as you and I know, databases continue to grow exponentially and indefinitely. And so being able to work collectively on leads is a huge bonus. So diving into the first one, it's the most common one people may already at least be familiar with, if not already use. I call it Shark Tank. You can call it something else like just all leads or leads not reached or anything like that. The reason for something like a Shark Tank, whether you initially assign leads right away to the Shark Tank or you wait a few days, is so that multiple people can attempt those leads. So if, let's say you initially want to assign leads and Follow Boss through something called round robin, where you're just evenly assigning the leads to the next agent in line. Or you can also be using first to claim, where multiple agents get a notification about the new lead, and whoever claims the lead gets the lead. If you go one of those routes, but you want to ensure that you don't have any wasted efforts or any wasted cost of generating those leads, you can automate pushing those leads that haven't been reached yet to the pond. This is different than a sort of accountability automation. In this instance, we're automatically assigning all leads to the pond that haven't been reached after a certain amount of time, even if the agent is doing what they need to be doing. So that would be something before you implement anything, especially before you implement something like this, you need to ensure that you have a meeting with your team and everyone is under the understanding of why you're implementing this. It's not to take away from people's ability to have success. It's to further the team's success as a whole. So here's essentially how you would create this. So if you don't know how to create a pond in Follow Up Boss, I don't have that on here, but you essentially go to the admin panel and click on ponds, and then you can create a pond and call it whatever you would like. So I call mine Shark Tank, and you can add whatever agents you want to add. But in this instance, I'm showing you how to utilize this pond in an automation. So in an automation, whenever you receive new leads in Follow Up Boss, again, a lot of this, I'm talking through it. It's not shown on my screen, but I'm going to be sharing a guide that goes very detailed step by step. Whenever you receive new leads in Follow Up Boss uses something called lead flow to say, okay, when I get a new Zillow lead, let's initially distribute it to this first claim group. So it's not a pond. And then assign this action plan. So that's most often like a drip campaign. In that action plan you're assigning to that new lead, which is that drip campaign, you'll edit that action plan and add a step. You'll add a step that is added on the specific day that you want to move to the pond. So that most often is like day 7 or maybe day 10 after 10 days of pain. And you can call that tag whatever you want. I just made it simple to understand and made that tag called Move to Shark Tank. And I put it on day 7. And then once you add that tag to the new lead action plans, then you create the automation. So below is a screenshot of what that automation would look like. It's pretty simple. You first click the plus button under admin automations. You click the plus button for the trigger, and the trigger is when a tag is added. In this case, it's the tag you just created, Move to Shark Tank. And then the action of what you want to tell Follow Up Boss to do when that tag is added is reassign. And then when you click on reassign, you say reassign to Shark Tank. So if you use smart lists, which I highly recommend doing in Follow Up Boss, now all of the people who have access to that pond have these leads show up on their lists. So perhaps you have leads show up initially just to one specific agent for X amount of days. And then once 10 days passes, then you add that lead to the pond so that other agents can also see that lead on their lists and call as well. Does that make sense so far?
Exactly, yeah. And for those that aren't using, the pond specifically, like you kind of were mentioning, it's a great way to not waste opportunities and also allow for others on your team to be able to be proactive and be on top of these leads in case someone else may have missed it or missed out on the speed to lead as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And you can implement something more advanced for accountability. Maybe on day 2, you check, has a call been made? If not, then we're gonna move the lead to the Shark Tank before day 7 and before day 10, so that although you missed that speed to lead initially, you can move to the pond so other people can try. Number 2, I put in all caps and italic with a star. Use at your own risk. This one is very risky, so I would reserve this to only the team lead and your sharpest ISAs who know exactly what to look for before they start calling these people. There is a lot of hidden money in the gold mine, but there's also a lot of risk. So you have to be very careful with this one. So why do I say use at your own risk? This pond we're creating is going to show leads who previously asked you to leave them alone or they said not interested. Now be sure you're following your laws. If they say do not call, then do not call them. This is for people who said they're not interested or they didn't flat out say do not contact, do not call. And I think even I'm not very familiar with do not call laws, but maybe if someone registers and fills out a form again, maybe that gives you permission. Do you know the answer to that, Trenton?
I don't, but what we typically would have done with our team was if they said do not call, obviously we would not call. They did not expressly say that, do not text us or email us. So we might still try that extra form of communication. If something happens in that regard, then obviously we would remove them. But yes, according to each of the state laws and things like that, make sure you guys are following those. And obviously, if you can work out for these leads, then great. So that way you're still following up with them and doing something with them.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah, and the reason why we're creating this pond is the I'm not interested response people just and by default, by nature say to you, it could just be a smokescreen. So we want to make sure if these people are truly interested, we're not missing those opportunities. So why use it? I kind of flip between the two words of gold mine or resurrections. These are people who registered again, meaning they physically filled out a form, either on your website or on another lead generation platform like Zillow. So people who have filled out a form again, which indicates they may be interested again. Otherwise, why would they fill out a form again and take the time to do that? So this is not just anyone looking online. They physically filled out a form with their information. So the reason why we're creating this pond and this automation is we don't want to miss people in the trash stage or the contact stage. I use both. So trash stage and FUB is most people use this if it's all bad information, or if the person just said, I'm not interested. And so the agent just defaults to the trash stage. The same can be applied to the contact stage. If someone says they're not very interested, but the agent doesn't want to trash them yet, they use the contact stage. It's stage that I got inspiration from Barry Jenkins on that one. So the reason we're creating this automation is when these new inquiries come in, unless you have this automation and pond set up, people in the trash stage, you're going to miss them. Follow-up boss for people, which is very intentional. For people in the trash stage, follow-up boss does not alert you on activity unless you proactively create systems to notify you so that you're not spamming people, wasting your time, and you're following your own SOPs as well as your own laws. If someone says DNC, they're in the trash, you obviously don't want to be prompted to call them again. So that's why I said at the beginning, use at your own risk in all caps. But there's a lot of hidden money behind it. And I actually got this inspiration from a previous office hours with Janelle. I think it was last year. So thanks for pointing that out. I hadn't even thought about that. So what you would do is first you create the pond. I call it gold mine. And then you'll create an automation where the initial trigger is new property inquiry. Now, this can be a little deceptive, but it's not just a property inquiry, it's any form being filled out. So any form that gets registered and followed up as a form being filled out because of all the integrations available gets logged as a new inquiry. And I'm adding a condition for only showing people in the trash and contact stage so that we're not missing those people. And then the action is to reassign the lead to the pond. But that's not the only thing you need to do, because unless you create a smart list, these people are going to be missed. So you also need to create a smart list. I try to avoid tasks. You could do tasks, but I try to avoid them because they compile on really quickly. So in Follow Up Boss, if you're not familiar with smart lists, I highly recommend watching other bosses in actions on smart lists and looking at other office hours for smart lists. But essentially, a smart list is a way to quickly segment and identify people. And we're trying to quickly segment and identify these resurrection slash goldmine people. So you'll stack filters in Follow Up Boss. The first filter being show me people in the stages of trash or contact. Show me people in the gold mine stage, or not stage, pond, sorry. Gold mine pond or resurrection pond. Show me people have been active in the last 14 days. So they filled out the form less than 14 days ago. Show me people that I have not talked to in the past week. I want to be a little bit conservative. If I just spoke to someone 7 days ago, I may not want to call them if they just told me not interested, and then for whatever reason they filled out a form. So up to your discretion on if you want to try less than 7 days after they just told you not interested. And phone has to be good. I forgot to add that to the screenshot here, but phone is good. I'm using this smart list to prompt me to call people. So you may want to include people without good phone numbers and just emails. But I would first see, can you keep up with all of your important tasks and lists with phone number is good. And then if you do have the extra time, then great. Show everybody, not just people with good phone numbers, because you want to have a realistic daily workflow. And by adding these pawns and adding these lists, you're adding more and more people to call. So you want to make sure you make yourself a realistic daily workflow, not only for yourself, but also for your agents. But does this one make sense? Did I go too fast through anything or skip over anything that didn't make sense?
I think it makes sense. Let us know in the chat if you have any questions regarding it. But something super important with this type of a list here is that number 4, that last communication equals more than 7 days ago. So if you were to have this list and you would follow this every day, when you contact one of these people on in part of this list, they would then fall off that list because they would then have been contacted. And so in theory, you would basically have this new list started almost every 7 days of all the new people that continue to have that activity that you still need to follow up with. So that's why these are so important.
Yeah, and going back to the theme of use at your own risk, the reason why you only want people who are very careful and know Follow Boss well, you don't want to just dial this list blindly once you're prompted to do so because they show up on the list. You want to take the time to open up the lead's profile and look at past communication. Because if they truly said, leave me alone, I want nothing to do with you, then you probably want to honor that and not piss them off more. And in order to remove them from the list in that scenario, you just remove them from the pond and then they don't show up on the list anymore. Hope that makes sense. I had another thought on this and I lost it, so hopefully it comes back later. I wanted to point out that one and one other tip and I lost it. But anyway, we'll go to pond number 3. Pond number 3 are high priority leads. Why use it? So when a lead registers that was not in the trash or contact stage on your website or another platform that's integrated with Follow Boss, they will take priority and they should take priority over someone who is just viewing things on your website. I also am including people intentionally clicking to save properties on your IDX because people are not just looking at things on your website, they are also registering and intentionally clicking save. So first you create a pond called high priority and add whatever agents you want to have access to this. Then you're going to create an automation so that leads are automatically added to this pond. So the automation is 2 triggers. It can either be a new inquiry or a property saved. This is not an and function. Someone doesn't have to do a registration and save a property. It's an or function. And we're going to add conditions to only include people staged to lead, because if someone is already being communicated with, then we don't need to move them to a pond for anybody else to call because they're already talking to an agent. So for me, I make the stage lead mean a lead not reached, but you're continuing to try. And we want to only show people that were created more than 7 days ago. The reason for this is most people already have an initial 7-day or 10-day plan for brand new leads, especially if you're using lists. So since someone is already high priority as a new lead, being less than 7 days old, there's no reason to move them to high priority pond yet, because you're already prioritizing them. So this is for people who are at least older than 7 days that have re-inquired or registered somewhere. And then the action, we're going to take 2 actions here. The first one is reassign the lead to that high priority pond. And then the second action, because you can do multiple actions from an automation and Follow Boss, is we're going to add a note. And the note being added just simply says lead re-inquired or saved a property, moving to high priority pond, and then it alerts the pond. You can add notes to other automations as well. I would just be mindful of how many automations you have adding notes, because especially if you're selecting to notify, because then the agent's email inbox just gets bombarded with notifications and then they just start to ignore them. So I'm purposely hand selecting which automations we're adding a note to so that an agent knows which leads to actually prioritize if they like notifications. So for the other ones I mentioned, the Shark Tank, that one does not require a note because they're going to be in some sort of new lead smart list. If you don't use smart list, do use smart lists. And then the gold mine are going to be in that specific gold mine smart list to prompt agents to call. So up to your discretion on which automations you add a note and notify your pond agents. I'm just being mindful in this case and not doing it to too many. I think Trenton's having problems with his internet, so I'm just going to continue on. So pond number 4, we're calling it mid priority. These are still people you want to ensure that you prioritize, but you want to prioritize them behind your high priority leads. So this is for all of the other leads that are viewing properties on your website, but they haven't registered on a form and they weren't clicking save on properties. So they're not as high priority, but they're coming back to your website and looking at listings, and they have not yet been reached. So create the pond, mid priority, and then create the automation where the trigger is property viewed. You're going to add a condition to select people in the lead stage. Again, we don't want to remove leads that are already assigned to a particular agent that's being nurtured and has already been spoken to. We're only going to show people in the stage lead, which means someone you haven't reached, but you're continuing to try. And again, we want to avoid pushing people to ponds in this case if they are newer, less than 7 days old. They are already prioritized in a new lead list or in your new lead procedures. So they have to be at least older than 7 days old. In this case, you're going to do the 2 actions, assigning to mid priority and adding a note. Up to your discretion on whether or not you want to add the note. Maybe keep a pulse and an eye on how many notes are being added from this automation, how many people and leads are triggering this automation, especially if you're doing a lot of remarketing online. If you're doing a lot of, if you have an IDX platform that's proactively sending listing alerts, like through Ylopo or Real Scout, or through even like Showcase IDX that integrates with Follow Boss, through anything like that. If you're proactively sending a lot of listing alerts, then you're going to be getting a lot of notifications. If that's the case, don't send the note because that's just too many notes, too many notifications. Pond number 5, vendors. Starting to switch gears here away from leads. You may be wondering why a vendor pond. So in a company format or even as a solo agent, you want to keep track of your preferred vendors, like your preferred contractors, such as painters, flooring companies, things like that. So you may already have a document of those contacts that you send your clients or that you reference to recommend to your clients. But what's nice about adding your vendors to Follow Boss is, I'm going to show you in a second, you'll be able to much faster and easier find your recommended vendors, and you'll also be able to much faster and easier see all of your communication. So just like we follow the philosophy with leads of if it didn't happen in Follow Boss, it didn't happen, we want to apply the same mindset for vendors so that you see all of your past communication with contractors, especially if something goes wrong. Worst case scenario, if something goes wrong with a mutual client that you refer to a vendor and you need to get something sorted, you can quickly access your previous communication with vendors. And so for me personally, with vendors I work with, no vendor except for maybe 1 or 2 very close friends has my personal cell phone number. Everyone has my Follow-Up Boss number. And so when I'm texting or calling vendors, I'm doing so through Follow-Up Boss. So everything gets logged, and with call recording, everything gets recorded. But we want to create systems and automations so that vendors don't get just added to Follow Boss and it just becomes chaos and unorganized. And so this is a multi-step process. This is a little bit more advanced than the other ponds I've shown you so far and the other automations shown so far. This is a multi-step process for adding vendors to FUB, adding them to a pond, creating automations, and make sure that they don't get lost. So step one is creating the pond and the automation for the pond. In order for this to happen, you'll want to create a vendor stage so that these vendors don't interfere with your lead database. Just like if you have agents in Follow Boss, you have an agent stage. And then you'll also create a pond. So if you're a solo agent, you can still take advantage of the next two slides I'm showing you. You just have no need for the pond. And I'll show you in the next slides. So so as I mentioned, you're with a pond, a vendor pond, you'll be able to share your recommended vendors / contractors with the rest of your team via using a stage, a pond, a custom field, an action plan, and an automation. Don't worry, once it's set up once, it's very easy. So after you create the vendor stage, you're going to create a custom field. And that custom field, I'm going to call it vendor type. And the custom field settings is a drop down. Again, if you're not following, because I'm not showing how to create all of these things in the presentation, I'll be giving you a guide showing you how afterward. You'll create the custom field. Side note, you can only create custom fields in Follow Boss through the owner account in Follow Boss. Admins cannot do that part. Same with creating a stage. You can only create a stage from the owner account, not an admin. And you're going to make the setting a drop-down menu. And you, in the drop-down menu, you make the options, the types of vendors that you most commonly recommend. So I would create one option for painter, one option for flooring, one option for roofer, one option for interior designer, anything you can think of. And then we're going to create an automation. And you want to add into your standard operating procedures for whoever is adding vendors to Follow Boss, whether it's your assistant, whether it's yourself or another agent, to say, when you add a vendor to Follow Boss, make sure you change their stage to vendor, because then that's going to trigger two different automations in the action plan. The first automation is the one you see on the screen here. The trigger is when a vendor is added to Follow Boss and the stage is moved to vendor, then we're reassigning the lead to the vendor pond. This is the second automation that happens when the lead stage is moved to vendor. The reason for this second automation is to prevent vendors from getting lost and the vendor type was not identified. And I'll show you what the purpose of vendor type is in a second and why you want to take that extra step. So in this case, you're creating automation. You're going to have two vendor automations. This is the second one where, again, the trigger is stage change to vendor. So it is possible for these vendors to have two automations run at the same time, but that's okay. The stage changes to vendor, but that we're adding a condition where the custom field of vendor type is empty, meaning the vendor was added to Follow Boss, great. The stage of the vendor was identified properly as vendor, but we forgot to identify what kind of vendor they are. Because if you just have a list of 200 vendors and no way to identify who is who, then that is not helpful at all. And it's more of a pain than it is help. So you want to have an identifier of what kind of vendor they are. So if that's empty and the person who added the vendor forgot to label the vendor type, then we're triggering an action plan. So you want to create an action plan that's only one step. And that step is to immediately assign a task. And that task says vendor type is missing in custom field. And you can either assign it to the agent assigned to this vendor, or you can assign that task to an assistant. And this can be a part of their task that they take on for you as a virtual assistant or in-house assistant. Now, the benefit of all of this work and setup. Agents can now really easily find your recommended vendors in a smart list and Follow Boss. So if an agent is on the go on an appointment with a client, or they're on the phone or they're emailing, and they need easy access to all of your recommended painters, they can easily find it. So this will be part of wanting to teach your agents before implementing all of this, of how to take advantage of this. But essentially, they would create two different filters in the smart lists. The first one is show me all of the leads in the vendor pond. And then you're going to add a second filter to find a specific vendor type. And then you'll select whatever category it is that they're trying to find. In this example, I'm trying to find all recommended painters. Number 6, off-market properties. Depending on your market, this may or may not be a thing. In mine, in the DFW, it is a thing. This option is for you if you or your agents in your company prospect expired leads, FSBO leads, circle prospect, or speak to any other leads who tell you on the phone they have a home, they would be willing to sell it for the right price, but they're not willing to put it on the market. So first, what you want to do is anytime you talk to someone who says that to you, you're going to create a separate lead where you make the name of the lead, the property address, and then you put the information of the listing in the note. So in this case, in this example, I'm showing they would accept or the list price is 500,000. Any other information about the property, maybe even there's pictures online that you can link to, and then click create note. The reason for creating a separate contact record is that conversation was very private, and you don't want there to be a conflict in communication and notes being shown to your buyer agents that you don't want them to see. So you have two separate contact records for the same property. The first one is the original record of the person you talked to and had the conversation with, and that all of the conversation notes and communications is private. And then the second one does not include any contact information other than the property address is in the name, and then the property info is in the note. Agents can now use this pond to find off-market opportunities via smart lists. This gives you and the agents within your company a better chance of not only winning and selling those listings, so you can do perhaps like a one-time listing agreement for those people, even if they remain off market. It also gives your buyer agents a competitive edge by having access to these off-market listings. Let's say that their buyer is unable to find the home that they want, or they keep getting outbid with multiple offers. They can quickly access the pond of people who would be willing to sell for the right price. And you can bring your buyers to that property and coordinate with the listing of unofficial listing agent. And that also proves to the person, the homeowner, that you do have interested buyers in their homes. So even if this one particular buyer doesn't work out, that increases the homeowner's trust in your team to sell their property and increases the chance that they list it live on the market. Last one is referral agents. So you probably have a list of recommended or trusted agents that you refer business to, whether it's because it's a particular type of property you don't work with. Maybe you don't work with land, but you know an agent who does. Maybe you don't work with renters, but this agent does. Maybe you don't work in this price point, but this agent does. Or it's in a different area. In order to take advantage of all of the efforts you've done to curate relationship with agents that you know and trust, and make sure that your company takes advantage of that list as well. This is also a multi-step process, kind of similar to what we're doing for vendors. So why use it? You would use a pond, or as a solo agent, you don't need a pond. You would just do the following steps. But you would use a pond so that the rest of your agents have quick access to your trusted referral agents that you recommend. So first you create the referral agent pond. You're also going to create a referral agent stage so that these people don't clog up your lead database, just like we created a vendor stage. And I recommend using tags to specify the market area they service for easily finding who is who. I use a tag Texas, but that's not sufficient. I would also use the city because Texas is so large. So one agent can work in Dallas, one agent can work in Houston, one agent can work in San Antonio. So we want to have a city also included in there so that we're not just calling someone and say, hey, I saw you work in Texas. Well, that's 5 hours away from me. So no, that's not a person I want to work with. In which case, when you create the list, you would add multiple tags. I would include Texas plus Dallas. And then I would switch this from include any. You can click the any word and change it to all so that the agent has to be located in Texas and they service Dallas and they service Fort Worth. Then your agents and yourself can quickly find those referral agents. So if you're a solo agent, you don't need the pond. You would just use the stage referral agent and use those tags as well to find those agents easily. Okay, so bonus tip. You may or may not have seen announcements. I don't know if everyone got the announcement this morning or yesterday, but Follow Up Boss has been beta testing the AI call summaries. And so if you don't have access to it already, you will soon because at least my account got an official announcement about it. And they sent an email. So the benefit of if it doesn't happen in Follow Boss, it didn't happen is heightened to another level because of AI call summaries. So if your agents are not using Follow Boss, you definitely want them to start using it now. And you definitely want them to start not only logging their calls in Follow Boss, but actually calling out a Follow Boss through the dialer and taking a step further and recording. Side note, I just remembered Follow Boss also recently launched the this call is being recorded. So if you're in a state where you have to disclose that, you can toggle that feature on, that power up on, to have that automated so that you don't have to say it actively. Here in Texas, we don't have to do it. So I wouldn't have that feature turned on, but you can. So this is great for the AI call summary is great for saving time, coaching, accountability, and database management. So let's go through those 4 categories real quick. The first one is coaching. So whenever you're doing one-on-ones, whether you yourself as the team owner is doing it or your operations manager or sales manager is doing one-on-ones, you can use those call summaries to review the notes to see how the agent could have improved their conversation and if they didn't convert the lead to an appointment, how they could have done so. It's also going to save the agent who made the call. It's going to save that agent time from having to write down extensive notes because the AI call summary is doing that for them. That agent can still add like the most important 1 or 2 notes from that call above the AI summary that's automatically generated. That's what our team does. We just add above the AI call summary the important information about the call. Another benefit is accountability. So whenever you're doing one-on-ones, you can look at the notes and ensure were the proper steps taken following the call. Was the stage change? Was an appointment set? Was an invite sent? Were all of the all the contact information input correctly? And then finally, if you have a database manager or virtual assistant, that virtual assistant's life just got a lot easier because a lot of agents, they make calls, they don't have time to put in the notes, but your database manager can go into the call reporting and Follow Up Boss and look at all of the calls logged for the past day for the agents, open up the lead profile, look at the notes and ensure that all of the protocols were met. Because even with all of the coaching and accountability sessions you have with agents, they're still going to forget, or they're just simply not going to have time to do all of the protocol steps. So then your virtual assistant can go through all of the calls that were logged and make sure is the stage correct, were the notes added, is all of the contact information put in correctly? Do we need to add anything to the background? Do we need to add anything to custom fields? Do we need to set them up on listing alerts? Do we need to set them up on a home valuation alert? Do we need to send them postcards or send a handwritten note through AM cards? The list goes on and on. So depending on the tech tools you use will determine what your database manager can do. But this is going to help a lot because before, without AI call summaries, the virtual assistant would have to click play and listen to the recording and listen to like a 30-minute phone conversation. And now they can take 30 seconds to look at the notes, know what to do, and make sure all of the steps were properly taken. And
I
you
think that's going to be a game changer.
yeah, yeah. And you probably don't want your agent spending their time doing that. That's not a high dollar, those aren't high dollar activities. So if you don't have an assistant, this is a great reason to get one.
But also we know that agents don't always fill out those notes either,
Yeah.
or they might be really quick with it. So to have this AI built into it and to be able to do that for you and actually have like detailed notes, like that's pretty impressive, on Follow Boss's end.
Yeah. Yeah. And to make sure I don't leave the solo agents out, I know I mentioned the solution for referral agents, for solo agents, and for vendors. For off-market properties, if you don't have a pond, you can still add those people to a new contact record with the property address and just have like an off-market stage and find those people that way. You don't need the pond for that as a solo agent. I talked about vendor for solo agents. The mid priority, you don't need the pond if you're not a team and you're solo agent. You can just add the note and create the smart list. Again, the main purpose of a pond is to share the leads with others, other agents. So if you're a solo agent, you don't have a need for ponds. Same with high priority. If you're a solo agent, you can still take all of these steps to add a note, to add the lead to a smart list. You don't have a need for a pond. And then I think I mentioned the solution for gold mine, same thing. You would just create that smart list. In this case, you can do a tag instead of a pond, where they get tagged as gold mine. And then instead of using the pond filter, you would use the tag gold mine to find those people. And then the first one, the Shark Tank, that one you don't need as a solo agent, because those new leads are already being prompted for you to call. So I know I went through those 7 really fast. So like I mentioned in the beginning, this was recorded. Where was I? I was at the AI stuff.
And you have something for everybody in attendance as well. Is that correct?
Yes, this right here. Yep. So if you scan this QR code in exchange for your email, you'll be emailed access to a step-by-step guide for setting up these 7 ponds. And when I say step-by-step, I mean literally step-by-step. If you're not familiar with Scribe takes screenshots and records your activities, which if you have an assistant or you need to create SOPs, I highly recommend it. You just go about doing these steps and then it records it nice and pretty. And it says, click here and do this and do this. And it's like step 1 with a screenshot, step 2 with a screenshot, step 3 with a screenshot. So it's very easy to follow. And so I've got it separated out by those 7 ponds. And within those 7 ponds, there may be multiple scribes because like I showed you with the vendor pond, there were multiple actions you needed to take to ensure your vendors are not only added to FUB, but they're categorized correctly and they don't get lost. So there may be multiple scribes or guides per pond. So after you receive the access to the guide, it will look like this. So it's just like a Canva thing. So the first slide just says, hey, this is the access to the 7 ponds. If you prefer not to DIY, as I did in the intro, we provide a demo for you set up in FUB. We have never offered setting up ponds, but if you decide to sign up for our services and prefer not to DIY this, we will offer this for a limited time if you sign up for our services by July 31st. We're not offering this to anyone else. It will eventually be added to our list of services in the future, but it will be an additional fee. So if you prefer not to DIY these ponds, you can do that. And then you'll finally gain, on the 3rd slide, you'll just click this for access. And just to give you a sneak peek, this is what it looks like. So the first pond I talked about, Shark Tank, you'll click on this and then it goes, you can maximize this here as well. You can maximize and it'll show you, go to Follow Up Boss, click Admin, click Action Plans, and it shows you where to click. Click All Action Plans. Find an action plan you want to edit for new leads. Click Add a Step. Click and drag it up to the day you want. So it's very crystal clear what to do if you are a DIY type of person.
Excellent.
Yeah,
This is
so
great.
hopefully I'll go from there.
Everybody, if you have not downloaded this, definitely do that. Can you show up that QR code one more
Yes.
time
Yeah.
for everybody? I also put your website in there, keetechnology.com as well. So if anybody would like to reach out to Elena with any questions you might directly have, for those that are watching on your phone, for this QR code, if you can't scan it technically, screenshot it, open it up in your Photos app, and then hold that, like click and hold the QR code, and it'll open up directly to that link as well. Um,
I can put the link in the chat as well if you
that works
don't.
as, yeah, let's do that. And then
Yeah.
keetechnology.com/ponds is the link for that. Let me drop it here for everybody to see. So feel free to take a look at that, get that free download so you can get those set up for the ponds for you guys and for your team. Elena, I want to say thank you for joining us here today. Apologies for my internet, dipping out for a while there, but I know that you probably fixed some butt with that as well. Everybody, this is recorded. It'll be on the YouTube page for Follow Up Boss, as well as the Follow Up Boss Success Community. It'll be available there for replay. And again, if you guys
Yeah.
have any questions, reach out to Elena. She will be more than happy to help you as well. Any last thoughts, Elena, that you want to share?
Yeah, I did see some messages in the chat. If you don't mind, I'll just skim
Go
through
for it.
them and
Yeah.
try to answer as many as I can. So yeah, I saw you answered, will it be recorded? Yes, it's recorded. Do we get a sheet of all these ponds and their criteria? Hopefully you snapped that QR code. Just join Miss a Lot. So Michael, just download that QR code and it's also recorded. So the first of 7, the webinar is up again. Oh, that was you. No, that was John. Could you make a pond for the end of a drip campaign? Yeah, sure. You can just edit the action plan at the very end to add a step where it adds a tag, and then that tag triggers moving to a pond. Sorry, can you tell me the name of the first pond? Is Shark Tank. For that reason, I don't know what that means. Sorry, I don't get the joke.
Good.
Michael, you're a past client of ours, coming soon. The free setup is for new clients, but we're not at a place or a capacity to be able to offer it to all past clients yet, but coming soon. How do you address spam bots in this environment? Rick, do you mind expanding on what you meant by that? Unless Trenton, you have any idea what Rick meant by that?
I don't, and unfortunately, I can't see the chat after I got kicked out. So apologies for that. But if you do want to follow up on that, Rick, definitely reach out to Elena, and we can help get that answered as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you again, Elena, for joining us. Like I said, everybody reach out to us if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll be back with our next Bosses in Action in 2 weeks. And everybody, please have a wonderful rest of the week, and we will see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Trenton. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.